Hi, everyone. I'm Carl Bierock. Welcome to the Jaguar Football Podcast. Here we are, Coach Baer. It is episode number 24 of this year. It seems like only yesterday we were just talking about offseason and getting ready for spring, but here we are. Obviously, the season has come to an end. I appreciate you taking time out to talk to us today.
Yeah, happy to be back, Carl. It's been a
Yeah,
minute.
it's been a while. I almost forgot where we parked the podcast machine, but we found it and we're here. So, wanted to just kind of open up and give you the floor and just talk about what you take away from this season. Personally, I would call this almost like the season of the 50-50. So there were some games that we talked about on this podcast that came down to one or two plays that went our way. The same one or two plays, didn't quite go our way. And that's where we stand. So wanted to, obviously have you start off and just give your thoughts about how the season went. And then we'll talk a little bit more about, where we see the program going. A lot of big, exciting changes in the opponents and just who we're going to play. So seems like we're going to cover a lot today, Coach.
Yeah, this season, a great reminder. You've heard me say it a few times here on the podcast, but just a great reminder that winning football games is hard to do. And when you're coaching, playing high school football, a lot of teams were working with teenagers, and it's just kind of one of those things where there's definitely been times the last few years where it's looked easy, right? Or a big win might have looked easy, but all the work, all the preparation, all the details that have to go into it really do make it hard. And we've been very fortunate to have a lot of those games go our way the last couple of years. And this season, was no different. A 7-3 record and a lot to be proud of when you look at, our fifth straight conference championship. And then obviously the big OT thriller, over Fox. Those are two things that for me, are always going to stick out when I kind of go back and think about and review the 2025 season for sure.
Yeah, that Fox game became an instant classic in
Mm-hmm.
both Seckman
Yeah, I
and,
mean,
and
we
Fox
we
lore.
uh we broke it down pretty good on the podcast, and it was a game that happened in week 2, so there was a lot of football that happened after that, and we broke it down in the podcast, and then had an opportunity at the banquet to kind of really dive back into that game and what it meant, and what it felt like, to be there, and it was a lot of fun to do. Just kind of relived it, and for me, solidified it in one of the top, 3, 4, or 5 football games I've ever coached in. Just the way we freaking snatched victory from the claws of defeat. There's a minute 30 left, and we're down a touchdown, and then you got the bomb to Cam Benson, and all the things that had to happen after that. So, that was kind of one of those things where it was fun, when we got to the banquet to really relive that night, relive those moments, and reality. And we talk about it once again. Football brings you the highest of highs and the lowest of lows. And obviously, the last time we took the field together against Northwest in the playoffs, going down by one score there with an opportunity, a lot of opportunities to kind of get it done in that game, and not quite getting it done. That was probably the lowest of the low, right? As far as how we could feel as a team. Certainly, there's worse things that happen to you in life. But as far as Seckman football, as far as how things go, being eliminated in the playoffs at home, in a game where we felt like we left a lot of opportunities out there, it hurt. And when I look back on the 2025 season, certainly we'll use that game as motivation. But when I'm thinking about the 2025 team, I just think about the last play of that Fox game. Where we have Ryan Woods, Jackson Rutledge, a handful of other guys making the tackle. And then just the celebration. We showed the film at the banquet, and just the party and the emotions and the smiles and the grins and things like that. I'm sure everybody's got a picture with them and their player after the game, and just that's the moment that when you think about this season, I'm going to hold on to. So like I said, lots to be proud of. That Fox game will live in infamy for a while.
No doubt about that. And speaking of the banquet, what was the mood around there, knowing that there was a lot of success this season? When you think
Mm-hmm.
about some of the opponents that we played against, they had playoff runs, and
Right.
so I mean, What was the feeling overall
Yeah,
there? Especially, obviously we say goodbye to the seniors and we appreciate them for their leadership, but what, some of the people moving up, what was their feeling around?
yeah, immediate aftermath. You know, it hurts, right? Immediate aftermath when the season's over. It hurts. You're kind of trying to find answers, figure out why. What kind of football team were we? Why did this thing sort of happen? And then, by the time you get a chance to take a step back, you're at the banquet. You look at a 7-3 season. We lose in week 1 to Parkway West, who ended up winning 9 games, 8 or 9 games this year, getting to the district championship, nearly winning the district championship in Class 5. We're a yard away from beating those guys. And then you look at Pattonville, a team, we did not play very well. Homecoming week, ended up kind of getting out on us early, 40-28. We chipped away, kind of got back to what we do in the second half. But that's a football team, Class 6 semifinal. They were one of the top 4 teams. You could debate it, but they're the top 4 teams when it got all the way down to the bracket. You play the bracket, that's all you got to do. And they made it to the top 4 in state, one game away from the state championship. And I felt like that was a team we could definitely play with and compete with. We have, beaten them 3 out of the last 4 years. And then obviously take a look at Northwest. We got on them early in the year and beat them quite handily, but they were an 8-win football team. They played a tight game against Oakville the week before. It was just one of those things where we knew they were a team that was peaking, and they were just a team that when you leave that many opportunities out there and they have the best football player on the field in Cohen Stark, and you give him another opportunity and another opportunity, that's what happens. So by the time we get back to the banquet, like I said, there's just a lot of optimism, and you want to celebrate the seniors and the things that happened this year, and also kind of paint a picture of where we got to go forward.
Yeah, and speaking of going forward,
Mm-hmm.
big changes on the schedule for next year, and we'll talk about that in future podcasts. But for those that may not know, we're moving up in conferences.
Yeah, we'll be jumping up 2 levels in the Suburban Conference. We'll actually be in the second highest level in the St. Louis area, and playing a lot of quite honestly better teams and programs than what we've been playing. And when I look at the schedule next year, and we'll have time to break it down and talk about a few of these teams. They're all 50-50 games. Games you go in and compete and you worry about the process and what you're doing, and we can win them. We go and we flub up and we don't really do what we do and have an identity. You can lose a few of them. So it's a schedule where you could go 9-0. We've seen that before, right? You could go 5-4. You can go 4-5, just depending on how you play the game and the way the ball bounces. So for me, it's a new era of Seckman football, and I'm excited. We've kind of been running through the same schedule the last 5 or 6 years. So it's going to be fun to see some new opponents, go do a few new things. And we talk about it all the time. I feel like this will really start to build us to be a better playoff football team. If we're talking about wanting to win a district championship, wanting to beat Jackson, this schedule is something that will prepare us for that, because we're going to see everything every week and be in the thick of it and face adversity in every situation. So by the time you get to playoffs, you'll be ready to go. So, getting the kids to understand that, and getting them to buy into that mentality. And we'll talk more about that as we move through the off season is going to be huge. But, I think it's built a lot like our wrestling schedule. When you look at the wrestling team, they carve those guys up, man. It's all season, especially early. They're going these tough tournaments, facing the best competition. And you have to believe they're going to KCI this week, which is the toughest tournament in the state. And then now, then towards the end of the year, they kind of flutters a little bit after they hit that peak. And then by the time they get to districts, they've already seen better competition than when they've been in districts and competed and won. So that's why you can see our wrestling team having so much success when they do get to district play and have so many guys qualify for state. And that's kind of the model what we're going to be following here at Seckman. And I think we're ready. It's definitely that time for us.
Yeah, I know, a lot of folks have been waiting for that opportunity to get that district, win. But, again, 5
Well, Carl,
Oh, good.
We've talked about this before once on the podcast. So while we're on it, and you talk about our schedule the last 2 years, and you're thinking, well, why was it that way? Well, we were building the schedule for these last 2 seasons when Cole Rubel was a senior. So it was like one of those things where these schedules can get built so far in advance. You don't really know. Well, there were certainly question marks coming out of that year. Can we still get it done? Can we do this, that, the other? So we didn't really know where we were going to. We knew we were going to compete. We knew we were going to keep trying to win football games. But it's kind of one of those things where when you lose a 2022 class like that, 9 seniors that have played 3 years in a row, and you're looking forward, you're like, can you keep this momentum? The worst thing that could have happened to us as a program was for us to really lose that momentum, right? Well, I feel like the last 3 years we've really taken charge of that momentum. We've really got a solid base underneath us, and now, our program's ready to get to that next level. So I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, you're talking about players, and in fact, a number of our players received quite the accolades, not only
Mm-hmm.
in the conference level, but even state honors. So obviously, it takes individual effort to do that. But I thought it was very interesting when you sent out the announcement that it's the players that are around them that help them succeed, and the coaches that put in the time and scheme to maximize their talents to have success on the field.
Yeah, obviously football is a team sport, but there's always going to be individual stats, individual awards, and things that guys can play. But it's just important to remember, a lot of these are basically team awards. If we don't have the record that we have, or we don't get, as far in districts as we do, we don't get the seat at the table. We don't get as many guys on the team depending on the success that we had that year. So we had all those all conference guys because we were, conference champions. We had a few less guys make that district team simply because we only made it to the semis, right? And then you look at, Dylan Lappy, who, received all state honors, while, he is a great football player, and we'll talk about him here momentarily, but, 27 wins in the last 3 seasons, that kind of gained some respect, in that voting room. And, when you talk about this guy setting the records on a team that, has won 27 games, then that coaches have to take notice. And that's how, he earned this spot, on the all-state team. When you're talking about the Class 6 all-state team, I know we had some area guys make all-state teams. When you're talking about the Class 6 team, you got to be a legitimate Division II, Division I football player to make this team. You're talking about the highest level of football in the state of Missouri, the biggest schools. When I'm in these meetings and I'm hearing coaches talk about their players, these guys are some legitimate dudes. They're being, recruited by Power 5 conferences, right? Teams. And, so to make the Class 6 team is a huge accomplishment for Dylan. Obviously we've talked about, he's the all-time leading tackler in program history. He's a 3-year starter, second in program history, or third in sacks. So certainly deserving of this award. And it's not one that we get to hand out every year. He's only the 6th player in program history and the first defensive player to be all-state. So quite the accomplishment, and glad we get to celebrate that with our football program.
Yeah, I mean, just an incredible stats that you quoted there. Tremendous player, obviously, and then to have that kind of accolade to wrap up the year is amazing. So again, we're so excited for all the players, to get these type of awards. And there was a new one this year that you mentioned in your email, like a new district, so to speak.
Yeah, so each, obviously the state of Missouri broken up into different regions, and the KC metro area kind of has its own thing, and the St. Louis metro area kind of has its own thing, and we're kind of always stuck right in the middle, right? So it was an idea of Coach Nager at Valley and Coach Schmidt at DeSoto. They wanted to come up with an organization to help represent Southeast Missouri. We're Jefferson County, we're not St. Louis suburban. Most of our values, our community, and how we live identify more with Southeast Missouri, in my opinion. So they formed, kind of this new organization with all 38 teams from Southeast Missouri, from the boot heel all the way up, to Arnold, where Fox ends it. So, it's kind of one of those things where it's neat to kind of get that recognition. You're looking at a pretty wide range of teams there. So it was really neat to be able to get about, I think we got 6 guys on that team this year
Yep.
in its inaugural year. And, those guys are all certainly deserving to be on that all SEMO region team.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, yeah, and it's when you think about all those teams are in Southeast Missouri, and there's some really big marquee names. To
Mm-hmm.
have 6 on this inaugural list is pretty amazing. So, hats off to them, and we wish them nothing but success, going forward. And
Yeah, it was fun to do, and I'm really excited to see how the organization grows here in the next few years.
well, that's great. It's good that we have that representation for Jefferson County. And so I want to remind everyone that we do have the full list and those graphics up on our Facebook page. You could also check out our YouTube page. We'll keep you updated on podcasts. And again, the season's not necessarily over. It's just a little bit of a break. And so we'll have content on the Facebook page as we continue into the off season. And Coach, before you know it, you're going to have a brand new class rolling through. You'll be sending the school bus over to the middle schools and teach them the Seckman way of how to take care of business. So, I look at this as, one chapter closes and now we're starting to open up the doors to the
Yeah,
next group. So wanted to give you the floor here as you take us out.
yeah, the gear, as we say, the gears of Seckman football, they never stop, and we've been working hard around here, since November 8th, the day after, and when you get bounced in the district semis for the first time there in a few years, obviously, you lose a game like that, a lot of time for reflection. Obviously, always the biggest question is what happened, and it's just football happened. For me, when I look at kind of at the top, from where I'm sitting, what could I have done better, and personally, just kind of reflecting on how I went about the off season, how the season went, I just kind of felt like maybe I got a little soft on some of our standards and how we go about our business. And maybe there were times where I held guys to different standards than others, or different positions to different standards than we have in the past. And, as the more I reflect on it, the more I kind of felt that, that's kind of maybe where we softened up a little bit this year. So, as that means going forward, we're going to look to tighten that up, and we're going to look to sharpen it up. And, as we go into 2026, you take a look around us, there's a lot of teams are taking full advantage of their off seasons. It's kind of one of those things where I can remember actually an interview pretty early on in June where Northwest was talking about working on special teams in June. Well, that seemed to have helped them in November. And what it's going to require us to get to that next level is a bigger commitment in the off season. We take a look at a team like Jackson, who, we've obviously set the bar to something we're trying to achieve and overcome. And, they're a team that they're picking up a football, most likely, 11 out of the 12 months out of a year, and they're doing things. So how can we, within the rules of Misha and what we're providing, make sure we're maximizing our skills, our abilities, in the time that we have together, so that, there is an open facilities period from January to February where guys can be working. And I'll have a little bit more information about that. How can we maximize our spring ball this year? We talked about it last, previous podcast. We did the spring ball with the offensive linemen last year. Naturally, that's something that we're going to want to expand on going into this spring and kind of see how it fits our kids and our community and how we can make it work. And then, like we talked about, we're jumping up conferences, and that's going to require a little bit more work. So, typically, in the past, we've had a 3-day week lifting model that's going to 4. And I'll have some more information out about that. But, if I have you in class 3 times a week, you'll be staying after school once for that fourth quarter lift. If I only have you in class twice that week, then you'll be staying after twice that week to get your Monday or to get your third lift and that fourth quarter lift. So, there's definitely going to be things that we're adding to kind of find a larger commitment level. And the guys that are here and the guys that want to be a part of this team are going to be committed. And those questions, are going to be answered in the off season. And we can't wait till the fall to figure that out. So, I'm excited. We have a solid base. We're not changing everything we do But there's certainly tweaks and improvements that we're going to make 2026 another good year.
Well, Coach, we are very excited and look forward to it. And just on a personal note, thank you so much for your time taking away from your schedule to do these podcasts. I know it's not easy, and also want to thank the viewers for tuning in. You threw up some slides at the banquet, and like the number of hours and people watching this it exceeded my expectations.
It's pretty wild. So definitely thank you to everybody that's followed the podcast. Maybe you watched all 24 this last year. Hopefully you continue, and whether you got a football player that's still in the program, or whether you have a football player that's moving on to other things, hopefully segment football is something that in this podcast that you continue to follow and support, and we can hopefully continue to make you proud.
All right. Well, we wish everyone happy holidays, and we will see you in 2026.
Thanks, Carl.
Thank you.